One. And we are recording with the great Claire Lopez, episode 770. It's a lot of episodes. Miss Claire Lopez, for all the new listeners who have not heard you before, who for whatever reason have not heard you before, which is a shame because they should have all heard you by now. Please introduce yourself.
Well, good to be with you again, Tommy, of course. So, yes, I'm Clare Lopez, founder and president of Lopez Liberty, LLC. A long background in national security, in government, out of government, in federal contracting, in think tanks, Washington, D.C. based think tanks focused a lot on Iran, other national security topics. Now, independent and doing a lot of media on Iran, of course, and the nuclear talks going on in Vienna, China, of course, and its biological weapons program, and then, of course, Ukraine and Russia more recently.
For all future listeners, today's Thursday, March 31st. I just realized today's Thursday. For the last two episodes, I've said today's Tuesday. Today's Thursday, March 31st, and I clearly need some sleep. 2022. Latest updates on Ukraine. I kind of want to jump in. I want to know your thoughts on, does Biden have dementia, or are these gaffes, or is he giving away the secrets? Are we actually going into Ukraine with the 82nd Airborne, and are we going to be removing Putin from power, or is it dementia? Is he going to get 25th?
You know, when we look at some of these press conferences that President Biden holds, different news agencies have, zoomed in on those little
The cards
that he holds, where when they,
Tough
they blow
question.
it up, you can see not just like talking points or some bullet points maybe that some of us might use normally, but also the entire question that's expected and maybe pre-selected, I don't know, as well as the answers. So, he obviously needs that kind of assistance with his press conference questions and answers. And yeah, I do think that, his cognitive difficulties have led to quite a number of misstatements, most recently on the trip to Europe, in particular to Warsaw, where I guess there were about at least three major slip-ups. One was what you were just saying there, Tommy, about when he was speaking to the 82nd Airborne troops. And the first thing that he said was something to the effect of, "Don't jump." Well, they're airborne. Okay. And then he made the inference, at least not maybe specific, but inference that they would be going to Ukraine. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they're going to Ukraine at all. And then he talked about chemical warfare, and should Vladimir Putin decide to unleash chemical warfare, in Ukraine, what would the United States do? I guess was basically the question, and his answer was, "We'll reply in kind. We'll respond in kind," which is utterly untrue, unthinkable. The United States is a signatory and an observing signatory to the Chemical Weapons Convention, under which we have renounced completely the use of chemical warfare, biological warfare too, under the Biological Warfare Convention. So that is not a correct answer either. Respond forcefully, respond immediately, something to that effect would have been a better answer, obviously. So, these kinds of slip-ups. And then what was it? Something he just said very recently, maybe it was even like yesterday, and he seemed to indicate that American troops were training Ukrainian troops in Poland. Now, I don't know if that's true or not true. I doubt it's something that should have been spoken publicly were it true. We do know that a small number of American troops rotating in and out have been helping to train Ukrainian troops inside of Ukraine ever since 2014. That is certainly true. But that more recent statement to the effect that American troops were training Ukrainians on Polish soil, as I said, I don't know if that's true or not true, but either way, probably not something that should have been spoken at a presidential press conference. So just a small sampling of some of the, I mean, you can call them gaffes, or he's just blurting things out that aren't on the little cards. Hard to say, but you know, it's probably time to just keep him home. And I don't mean to depend on the Vice President, Kamala Harris, either, because as we'll recall, during her recent trip to Eastern Europe, she also was hopeless. The worst of all was probably that joint press conference with, I think it was the president of Poland,
I think
if I
so.
remember. And the question put to her was something, put to both of them really, was something about, you know, what would we do to help and take care of Ukrainian refugees? And, you know, Kamala not only looked to her counterpart to answer the question, sort of deferring to him when the question was really more, I think, put to her, but then she burst out into this weird cackling that she does, laughing and laughing. It wasn't a humorous topic in any way, shape, or form. So, you know, the alternative to Joe is really not Kamala either. Hard put to say what would be better. Well, I can think what would be better. It would be a completely different administration, but we don't have that right now.
Yo, what the hell is going on? Like with Biden, I think it's in all of my medical expertise, I think it's probably like dementia. That's what it seems like. It seems like it's onset dementia, probably like rapidly onsetting, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Kamala just seems like insane.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, you know, those within the Democrat Party and his wife, Jill, you know, all, and the media, I can't leave out the media, all work together to shove him across, you know, the finish line this last election back in November of 2020, when they knew full well that he was not up to the job of being commander in chief, much less leader of the free world. And they did it anyway, because they knew, I mean, this is my interpretation anyway, they expected, even at that point, 2 years, well, year and a half ago, you know, that he would not be able to manage the responsibilities of the position, but that there would be a junta, if you will. I've called it that before, a ruling junta comprised of people like his chief of staff, Ron Klain, maybe others, perhaps including Susan Rice, perhaps including, you know, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know who all, but including folks like that would actually be running US government national security policy. And it didn't matter, you know, that Joe Biden himself would not be actually in charge, but that they would. That's what's happened, I think, in my you know, opinion.
Yeah, I think that it's kind of the only logical conclusion you can come to, is not just that this guy has dementia, looks like we're just going to follow his orders lockstep. It's no, people around him are much like elderly people with dementia are often taken advantage of. That's exactly what's happening around him. There's an unnamed, unelected, unaccountable junta around him.
Yeah. and they get to set policy, run policy, and this is just fine with them and the compliant U.S. mainstream media.
Yeah, and it's great because, and then any backlash just falls on Joe. It doesn't come to them. They're the unnamed junta.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other part of it. True.
Yeah, it's hiding behind like the board of directors of a corporation, and everything
Mm-hmm,
falls on this
mm-hmm.
face of the CEO. So with on a less depressing note, on Ukraine. Whoops, wrong button. I just pressed a button. I meant to press volume. I'm losing my mind, like Joe Biden. On the situation, I'm sorry. On the situation in Ukraine, though, it seems like there was a kind of, if I'm not mistaken, that Zelensky was maybe open to some sort of talks with Putin, and it seems like Biden, and this is my theory on it, is that what happened with Russia going into Ukraine allowed Xi Jinping and China to see what would happen, kind of theoretically, if they went into Taiwan. And from our standpoint, and this is actually kind of in Biden's defense, which I don't do, but I'll just go with it, is that if we just allow Putin and Zelensky to come to terms with each other, and Putin just gets to take a little bit of Ukraine, and there's really no massive reprisal, if I'm the US, I'm looking at that as that's not the precedent we want to set with China. The precedent we want to set with China is that you can't have an inch, which maybe could explain why Biden goes in there when it seems like things are cooling off a little bit. And he goes in there and says, 82nd Airborne's going in. We're going to use chemical weapons. Biden has to be, or Putin has to be removed. Is there maybe that? Is it less of a we're doing this against Putin, and is it an act against China to say, hey, you can't just come in and there will be no appeasement? Or is it really just an unhinged, dementia-addled Biden?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to follow what's going on in terms of a coherent, cohesive U.S. government policy regarding Ukraine and Russia. And I wanted to bring this up. I wanted to mention, the most recent announcement, I guess, out of the U.S. intelligence community, to the effect that, well, Putin has been isolated by his own inner circle, and they're not really telling him everything that's going on, and they haven't revealed to him how bad the losses of the Russian army are inside of Ukraine, or how successful the Ukrainians have been in holding off the Russians, and even beginning these last several days to push the Russians back and out of certain places, peripheral places, let's say, to some of the major cities. So, this, well, Putin really doesn't know. And I've got my suspicions about that. And I'll admit they're suspicions, not necessarily based on hard evidence, because we don't have that. But it seems to me that this line of, narrative might be a kind of a lame attempt by the U.S. national security folks to give Putin an excuse, give Putin an out. Now, I've talked about giving Putin an off-ramp from this assault, from this invasion. But what I was talking about were things like what is being discussed, as far as I can tell, by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and also in various mediated talks that I understand are going on with Turkish mediators, perhaps with Israeli government mediators, and Europeans. And those would be things like, well, Ukraine is not going to be a member of NATO anytime soon, doesn't meet the criteria, not going to meet the criteria. Number two, perhaps Crimea, facts on the ground, already is under Russian control, and to all intents and purposes, with the agreement of the Crimean people who did vote in a referendum after 2014. So that's two. And then number three, the most contentious issue, I think, I guess most observers probably would say, would be the status of the Donbass, where these two oblasts are located, Donetsk and Luhansk, and what would be the status of that area, those two oblasts and the breakaway so-called republics within each of those. Most contentious. But those are the three topics that I would think of as potentials for off-ramps, if you want to call it that, that could be under discussion in these various mediated talks between Zelensky and Putin and so forth. But but not saying, well, Putin gets off the hook because, well, he really just didn't know what was going on, and his senior military and intelligence, military commanders and intelligence and advisors, just they deceived him. He really didn't know what was happening. I'm not buying that for a minute, and I'm just really suspicious of our own intel community narrative that seems to be being pushed here. Just today, yesterday, I guess we've heard that. I'm not going for that. I'll go for the off ramp of the three things I just mentioned.
What do you think about the kind of like floating of the idea amongst the mainstream media outlets, which are in bed with the current administration, about like the acceptability of a small nuclear war? Is the most
no such thing as no.
I know it's insane.
That's crossing the Rubicon. That must not, cannot happen.
It's the end of the world. It's the end of the world. It will very quickly go from strategic tactical nuclear weapons to the megaton monsters.
It simply is a line that must not be crossed, like other WMD. I mean, like chemical and biological, I would say.
Yeah. The idea that there's like opinion pieces. It's like small nuclear war is inevitable, but here's why that's a good thing. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? But do you think there's any substantiation to the claims that China was going to invade Taiwan this fall, but now they're not going to?
I don't know. Obviously, the CCP, Xi Jinping, very much want to drag Taiwan back into China proper. It'll be noted, of course, that historically Taiwan is not a province of China, has never been a province of China, but nevertheless, that's their objective. That's their stated goal repeatedly. I think I've talked before about reasons why such an invasion by China of Taiwan might be postponed. And one of those was the November this year, November 2022 meeting of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party to vote and either decide to give or not give Xi Jinping his coveted but unprecedented third term as party leader. He does have internal opposition. I don't know that that is enough to prevent him from winning that vote. But nevertheless, November is just now, as we, we're entering April here this year, basically, and that means that November is about 7 months off, more or less. And I'm not sure that Xi Jinping and the CCP, having watched this whole past 5 weeks of the stumbling, bumbling Russian attempted invasion of Ukraine, held back and halted in so many places by the fierce opposition of the Ukrainian people and army under the leadership of their president, having watched that and realizing the likelihood that Taiwan would be at least as difficult an objective to take as Ukraine, if not more, being armed and trained, again, by US military in Taiwan, also, by the way, armed and trained with some of the most advanced weaponry available. And also the fact that an invasion of Taiwan would not be across land either. It would be, an amphibious landing across water. What is it, 90 miles of distance between China and Taiwan. And so, it may be that the CCP is having some second thoughts about that. I don't think it changes their desire, their determination to grab Taiwan, but I think it might affect their military planning. And also, here's the other thing, watching the entire world essentially unify against Russia in financial terms, in diplomatic terms, and in military terms, providing defensive weapons to Ukraine from everywhere. Watching that and realizing, that Russia has just turned itself into a pariah state.
Yeah.
And Russia is devastating its own economy even worse than it was before, as well as taking huge military losses, none of which can be recouped quickly, even were the conflict to end very quickly now or soon, even then, were that to happen, which doesn't look likely, Russia would not be able to recoup those terrific losses that it sustained. China's watching all that. And while Russia will continue to be China's gas station and maybe supermarket, I'm talking about oil, gas, and agricultural products like grains, wheat, that China needs from Russia, I'm not sure that China looks at Russia anymore as an asset, but perhaps more as a vassal state. I think that's where Russia's headed vis-a-vis China, to be a vassal state, which is how China over, centuries of history has tended to look at barbarians, as they would call them. Today, I think we would call Russia barbaric as well. But that Russia is not as much of an asset to China as perhaps a growing liability to be associated with it openly, to be propping it up economically. China has not chosen to assist Russia militarily in any way. So I think China is looking at all of those factors with regard to Taiwan and with regard to its own relationship going forward with Russia itself.
Is the US-China conflict inevitable?
Well, we're already in a conflict. I mean, as far back as mid-2019,
when they released
an outlet of the Chinese Communist Party, Mouthpiece media outlet, declared people's war against the United States. So, I mean, let's make no mistake, we're already at war with China. But, given the way they look at warfare, based on, of course, the 1999 unrestricted warfare warfare manual written by two PLA colonels at the time, given that that's how China looks at warfare and lists in that document, I don't know if it's almost 24, I think 20 something different spheres of warfare, to include technological warfare, commercial warfare, trade warfare, diplomatic warfare, biochemical warfare, and many others. The fact that they look at warfare in that kind of a holistic way, when we of the West, and especially here in the United States, we haven't quite grasped that yet. We don't ourselves understand that kind of warfare, and we don't to practice it ourselves, I mean, and we don't We don't understand how China is doing that. So when this Chinese mouthpiece talks about, people's war against the United States, I don't think our leadership in national security actually understood what that meant. And they may have construed it at that time, it was in 2019, to mean something like tit for tat with then President Trump's, trade sanctions and that sort of thing. Well, that's not what the Chinese mean. They mean the full scope of unrestricted warfare as laid out in that. It's quite a slim, really, monograph. It's very worth reading in English, of course, translation. But we're not grasping that. And that is how the Chinese are fighting us. And so, yes, we are at war with China because they said so.
So I guess, and maybe this is the answer, is that it won't be a hot war in the traditional sense. I guess that's what I was asking, but maybe that's the whole purpose, is for them to avoid a
Well,
hot
remember
war.
again, another famous Chinese writer, Sun Tzu, from many centuries ago, talked about how it is the highest objective of warfare to actually win the war
Before it's
without going
Oh,
into kinetic warfare. And that's exactly what unrestricted warfare is based upon. And so when we look at the way China has infiltrated our institutions, let's talk about that. I just finished reading a few days ago Peter Schweizer's new book, Red-Handed. And in it, he describes how China over the last decades, and I mean 20 plus years, has succeeded in infiltrating our academic institutions, our media institutions, our government institutions, public health, could go on and on. Perfect implementation of unrestricted warfare, but they're inside of our country, our government, our institutions right now, and have been for a long time, and are gaining influence as we speak. So yeah, to your question, the answer is yes. They do think that they can take us over, or at least take us down, without necessarily firing a shot. Although, of course, that is the ultimate threat, and the ultimate danger to be avoided if we can. But understanding and countering all these other ways that they're at war with us.
it kind of seems like that's the only way we could beat them, though, which is, I mean, a terrible conclusion to come to, that you'd want to maybe goad them into war because that's where we can beat them. It's like,
Oh, I'm not sure we can.
really?
Certainly not in the East, in the East Asia area. Certainly not in China's expanding zone of influence across the South China Sea. I was just reading about the Solomon Islands today, and other places in the Pacific. But even putting that aside, and I hope to put it aside, the infiltration, the penetration, and the suborning, the internal suborning of our institutions to Chinese influence, I think perhaps is already at a danger pitch in terms of the national security threat to the Republic. What did I just list? I listed academia, generations of our students, and then the influences that continue on our campuses, Thousand Talents program, Confucius Institutes, and that sort of thing. The outright buying of influence in our corporate world, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. Peter Schweitzer goes into all of these areas in really great detail. It's very readable, by the way. It's not a hard read. It's a hefty book, but it's very readable, red-handed. When we look at that kind of penetration and of our government institutions, right at the tippy top of our political parties and presidency. Chinese influence bought and paid for. That to me seems a very immediate and critical danger to the republic. Whereas outright, direct, kinetic military conflict hope to, put that off, keep that away. But these other ways of suborning this republic, are already in full view if we care to look.
I'm gonna write the name of that book down right now. Red-handed.
Yeah, I'm looking. I don't have it right here in front of me, but the main title is Red-Handed, and then there's a subtitle, but Peter Schweitzer, and it's a brand new book just out, I guess, the end of last year, I think.
Got it. So how does the United States get out of this then? How do we wriggle out of this?
Well, number one, awareness, and thanks to you and other outlets like you, podcasts, radio, TV. Epoch Times has been doing yeoman's work. Information, accurate information, education of the American people, because obviously, the answers to this, the pushback's not going to come much, at least from Capitol Hill, at least not until our midterm congressional elections later this year in November of 2022, taking office not until whoever wins, not taking office until January of the following year. So what I'm saying is that this is going to happen. The awareness and the pushback is going to happen at local levels, and it can happen at local levels. When I'm talking about academia, I'm talking about those who are influential in funding, maybe their alma maters, for example, and letting leadership at those institutions know why. Well, you're not getting an alma mater gift from me this year. Those kinds of things. And then of course elections, and again at the local level too, because it's so important there, where the Chinese influence is as concentrated, I would say, as at the upper levels, of Congress or the White House. It is at the local levels, and there people in local communities, once aware, once knowing what's going on, can do something about it. So I guess that's what I would say, that it begins with awareness. And I think American people are becoming aware more and more about what China has been doing to us, is doing to us, and then also what they can do to counter that, again, at the local level.
How much Chinese influence do you think is in specifically the White House junta? Because when I look at someone like Biden, and I tend to look at it as dementia, and I look at someone as Kamala and I go, it's incompetence. But then part of me goes, I mean, how much of this is a controlled demolition that's being pawned off as incompetence and dementia?
Well, again, I'm going to refer people to Peter Schweitzer, and he's done a number of interviews too, even if you haven't gotten the book yet or been able to read all the way through it yet. Peter Schweitzer's been doing a lot of interviews on networks like Newsmax and One America News and Fox News. Also online outlets like Epoch Times. Look at some of those, even as maybe you're making your way through the book, which, as I said, is it's a hefty book. Could take some time to get through that, but in the meantime, pay attention to what Peter Schweitzer is telling us. This corruption, and there's no other way to put it, it was targeted at the Biden family, okay, for years, going back to the Obama administration years, when the current president, Joe Biden, was vice president. And there's just no other way to put this, but Hunter Biden, his son, was bagman for the entire family in mafia terms. And the largesse that he raked in, including a lot of it. I mean, I'm talking about millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars from, well, lots of places, Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, but especially overall China. That money was distributed within the family. And as the Laptop from Hell, name of the book, excellent, another book by Miranda Devine, says, and gives the evidence within that book, that those donations, those payments to Hunter Biden were used, yes, to pay off the big guy and family bills across the family. That is a crime family. There's just no other way to put it.
Do you think anything's going to come of the Durham investigation, or is that just delusional hope?
Hard to say. We'll all have noticed that just very recently the what was it? The FEC, right? Fined Hillary Clinton and fined, who else was it? Certain figures within the Democrat Party, I believe. I mean, minimal, really token amounts of money, fined them for certain behavior roles, in Russiagate. I don't know. When we read not so long ago some of the court filings submitted by Special Prosecutor Durham, they seem to indicate that the investigation was serious, certainly ongoing, maybe getting closer to the inner circle that perpetrated this hoax on the country, and 4-year just 4-year hoax, against the Trump administration. We're just going to have to wait and see. I've got no, inner view of what's going on there like anyone else, just waiting to see.
So one guy I've interviewed twice in like the last 2 weeks is Brandon Weichert, who wrote the book Winning Space: How America Remains a Superpower. And his argument is that so much can be alleviated by just taking the domination of the high ground and of controlling really like the skies being orbit, geosynchronous orbit. Is there any
China certainly is doing that, right?
Well, yeah.
But I don't know if anybody watching here today perhaps watched earlier this morning when that space launch went off, taking 6 passengers up to the edge of space, right? And bringing them back quickly. I mean, it was a very short flight. I don't know, like 10 minutes or something, bringing them safely back down to Earth, gently landing that rocket, the booster missile, gently landing it smack dab in the middle of the circle, the target circle for the landing, and then bringing separately down the separated capsule with the 6 passengers, bringing them down safely back down to Earth. And the reason I'm referring to this is that it seems to me that yes, China has stolen a march on us with regard to space. I mean, satellite killers, and they have militarized space. That's part of unrestricted warfare too. But what we're seeing now is just really so exciting. A launch, space flight or near space flight like we saw today, the involvement of an Elon Musk, let's say, with SpaceX, and his collaboration, I think, probably with our Space Command, to put up into space backups, fallbacks, resilience to potential future attacks by China. So, it's interesting to watch. I mean, President Trump is the one, of course, who developed and launched our Space Command while he was in office. But now we're looking at America's, strong suit, and that is our private sector ingenuity and initiative. But in collaboration, I think probably with Space Command. I hope that's the case. It looks like it to me, but what do I know? But that gives me encouragement to watch, and that may be where our credible counter to China's militarization of space may be coming from.
That's what I hope it is. I mean, we have Elon Musk. He's the Tom Brady. Like, we have this guy, and it can't all fall under. I mean, we also have Bezos. Bezos isn't as much as like sort of a media playboy as Musk, but I mean, he's no idiot either. I do think, I mean, Mr. Weichert lays out, because Mr. Weichert, he was brought in to like brief the Air Force like a week ago on like hypersonic missiles.
I haven't yet, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you really, when I thought of you when I read the book, it's I think you would be wildly interested, and that's actually something I've interviewed a ton of candidates running for Congress, and I've done my best to like put together interviews with them, with Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough, so they can go on speeches and talk about vaccine mandates and all that good stuff. But I'm thinking about kind of shifting now. I want to start trying to bring on as many like experts as because his book really kind of scared the shit out of me, but it also gave me hope in that I was like, as you just said, I do think it is like a credible counter that the US could still sort of pull out on. And I want to try to start bringing awareness to that. I want to get on generals. I have my whole plan where I want to start kind of bringing attention to it and showing that like it can be done. And I think with Elon, I think that you're having it's having the same sort of romanticism that like the moon shot did, where it wasn't just we gotta beat the Soviets. It's like, no, we're gonna walk on the moon, and sure, it leads to a bunch of other, the Corona, the Keyhole, the satellites, the NRO, the National Geospatial Agency. It has a lot of those aspects that maybe aren't as sexy and declassified, but I think you almost need a headline grabbing publicity thing like walking on the moon, and it pulls everything else forward. It sort of raises the tide, and that's kind of, again, it might just be my own romanticism, but I think that's like what like an Elon Musk can do, whether it's shooting a car into space, or it's Starlink, or it's trying to get a guy to Mars. I do think that is like that's our fighting chance.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's a great idea for future programs too.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to start trying to do. And it sounds insane, but I also realized that if 2.5 years ago you said I'd be interviewing Dr. Malone and putting him in touch with guys running for Senate, I would have said you're high.
There you go.
So my logic is like, I'm going to set an impossible goal and see if I can't actually start pushing forward like a more massive budget for Space Force or something. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'm just delusional. But
no, it all sounds good to me.
And I know you got to run, so I will let you go. I completely forgot. I realized, I was like, oh shit. As I said, I'll aim to let you go 10 minutes before, and I'll end up giving you 5. So I will let you go. Ms. Lopez, I'll put your Twitter, your websites, all that good stuff in the description. I will see you next week. Everybody go follow her. Go check out her writings. Go check out her interviews. It's fantastic. As always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yes, ma'am. Take care.